info. No data, no active stream. Good stream is healthy. Why is he? Okay. Why is the video not available? There we go. Why is this thing? Fuck. Why does my stream health suck? 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 Okay, we're getting shit for... Okay. Ah. Okay. Why are we not getting... was healthy, but now we're at shit. When watching. Yeah, I have no idea why we're getting streamed for shit. Yeah, yeah, for this event I wanted to do covering different things, but such as the wall and the Kaepernick thing, but for some reason I can't because I'm getting such lag on my stream. But for some reason I don't know why I'm getting that. And let me see if I shut down the stream and restart it. Again. Okay, here we go. We're getting something good. And looks like it's not doing bad. At least we're getting green. And first of all, with the things like the Kaepernick issue is, as I've seen on the whole thing with the NFL is really, I think that's kind of a joke that where he has to be paid from the NFL. Here's why: is basically is we're talking that's 60-80 million that they have to pay him is really kind of laughable. And the reason why is basically because what we're doing is we're talking that he is essentially voluntarily working with the NFL if he gets a job, and it's not that they're basically had this blackball against him, but rather that what we're talking about is that he is basically a player that has no abilities that would be conducive to a team comparatively to the lack of leadership points that he brings. And that's the whole point. It's not that he's some type of great quarterback that people are saying, oh, he's so great and he brings so much to a team. He's a quarterback who brings a limited spread offense that comes from Nevada. And that was the whole point. And if we look at that, we'll see that the points are that he doesn't have a whole offense that he brings to the team. And when we see that he's only bringing a limited offense to the whole team. And when that happens is you get things such as the downing the knee, which was becoming a huge distraction for the teams. We see the fact that he was basically, you see his limited playbook. He would often run often with the team, and not being able to develop plays. Even though his last year he did produce a 90+ rating, when we used the new quarterback rating system, we saw that his rating system was actually on the new system. The new rating system was on a steady decline, and it's showing that he was not being able to actually run an offense itself, and that's even on his modified spread offense, which is a real basic offense that any high school kid could run. And they could just snag a quarterback out of high school, and that quarterback out of high school at like freshman level could run that offense. And that's the whole point, is we're talking about a guy that's supposed to be an NFL quarterback, and this isn't like a rookie. This is someone who had been there for a few years. And if we're talking about someone who needs to actually learn the job, he wasn't learning anything. He was spending all of his time on social justice instead of learning the position. And when we talk about a job, your job is to get better at learning the position. It doesn't matter if you're a ditch digger or a quarterback of an NFL team. Your job is to get better. Now, if you can't do that, and then you also have these points that would be a distraction, that's the whole deal. Now, when it comes down to the wall with it, now basically is we knew that the Democrats were not going to give them all the money. We knew that they were just going to basically put in that poison pill of the lower number of beds. But on the other end, we see that Trump did not exactly aim by doing an executive order. He did not exactly do something that would be actually viewed as constitutional. You can't exactly start taking money from departments and start rerouting it. That's not exactly how the Constitution is written. There's certain appropriations, and you have to follow those appropriations as written. And this is the whole point. Because if we actually did that, we could essentially, that could be extrapolated out to any party could essentially take any money that they wanted written. And it wouldn't essentially mean that they could do it from any point. Such as if we're looking at, let's take an example of the Green New Deal. Let's say that doesn't pass or doesn't pass to their likelihood. They could essentially, if a Democratic president gets in, they could essentially start stating they're going to declare a national emergency on the war on climate change, which, as you see, you should know by now that I am a huge skeptic on that, because of the whole basic idea of photosynthesis really disputes that whole point, which is a real basic scientific fact, and it actually proves completely against the idea of climate change, that carbon has anything to do with it. But they could essentially use that and essentially start rerouting a bunch of money from every department. They can declare war on climate change. That starts allowing the Department of Defense to start rerouting money. They could reroute money from the Department of Defense. They can start using money from Homeland Security to start doing stuff and saying we need more money from that to combat climate change and all this other garbage. Because they deal with certain things. We can state that Health and Human Services has to deal with certain things, and they can start rerouting out money how it goes. And soon enough, you're going to see that basically is they're going to pretty much implement a good portion of that Green New Deal without actually passing anything. And that's why we can't have this, and that's why we are a representative constitutional republic, not a democracy and not a dictatorship where a person can actually start rerouting money. Even if they have the best intentions with it, someone else can come along and start changing things around and start gutting agencies without actually constitutional authority. And a person can actually essentially just state, oh, it's a national emergency, I'm going to go to war. Oh, it's a national emergency, I'm going to eliminate the right of freedom of speech. Oh, it's a national emergency, I'm going to get rid of the Second Amendment. oh, it's a national emergency, I'm going to get rid of the 10th Amendment, which is the right of the right to be kept within the states, and those rights not kept by the states go to the people. So essentially, they can limit the rights of the people down to what's ever on the Bill of Rights, and that's it. And they can essentially make a narrow view of that. And then, since there's essentially been a very, very narrow view on it to begin with, and essentially trying to skirt around the law to begin with, they can essentially create this idea that the Bill of Rights, which has already been abused to begin with, they can essentially virtually take away everyone's rights. And that's why you could essentially use a national emergency for almost anything that essentially allows to, in this case, a very, very mild-mannered way, or a very massive way to declare martial law in a certain extent. In a very, very mild way, where it's essentially trying to create martial law over a certain budget area with it, but you can, in a massive way, you can declare martial law over everything and basically declare yourself king of the entire budget and decide what everything's going to happen. And that's where the problem comes from. We have the three bodies of government: the judicial, the executive, and legislative, for a reason. And that's why these are set. And you can't override them no matter what you want. And that's why we have them set to begin with. And if we look at on like more news, you're going to see that's why you're seeing people like Ann Coulter tend to buck the president. Next news thing I'd like to go over is the shooting in Aurora, Colorado. There's another one, and the fact is we find another one, and it's basically and this person was apprehended, or no, this one's Aurora. Is this Aurora, Illinois? Oh no, Aurora, Illinois. Sorry, I meant to say Illinois. And it's basically, we're finding with these shootings is a little bit different. Is with these cases is we're finding that these ones are pretty much always, in the case of basically where they're where they always hits they're always going after targets that are essentially weak targets. Now basically is you're going to have these people that are going to say, oh, not an immigrant, and all these ones with it, and trying to bring up those points with it. But the fact is that's not the argument. The argument is what's happened. What do all these locations to have at the whole point? And the whole point is what these places have in common is that these locations are always going to basically be open locations, and these locations are always going to be. Let me close the door for a minute. Sorry about that one. But the locations of these shootings are always going to be in these open areas. And right now, whether you're getting the usual left-wing people doing the "my heart goes out to them," blah 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 blah, and right after that, they're going to be, "Oh, we need to go and go for gun control." And this is what they end up doing every single time. And it was at the Henry Pratt Company in Aurora. I can guarantee you that when you get companies and such like that, every single time when we get companies or things like that, and here's this Brian Kranzenstein, yeah, he's saying gun control now, yeah. Guess what? With it is every time they do it with it is every time we find this is they're asking for gun control. Basically, gun control is not the issue, because let's look at the actual thing. Is this was a company, probably fired from the company and was mad. So what he ends up doing is shooting up the company, and that's the whole issue. So he ends up basically shooting up the company because he got fired, blah 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 blah. Well, we are finding situations like this, but what ends up happening with each one of these places is they have nobody that's armed there, so it's a weak target. Every one of these weak targets are always going to be the ones that are hit with mass shootings. Every time you look at the San Bernardino mass killing out there, the mass murder out there. This is a few years ago, and that was the same situation. People were killed out there. Actually, a friend of the family, former friend of the family, was actually out there, and well, he was actually smart enough to vote for Hillary Clinton after the massive shooting with it, which shows how bright he was after that. That he was actually he was actually in a back room, luckily enough. But he votes for Hillary Clinton after Hillary Clinton wants to bring in more of the same people who actually shot up the place, which is quite humorous. But when it comes down to it, is we find it basically is it's basically a situation to where we see that it's a matter of people who are just hitting weak targets. It doesn't matter if it's at a school, if it's at a place of work, if it's at a government building, or if it's at a baseball practice of Republicans. These are all unarmed areas, and that's the whole situation. That's all the common factor. And so gun control is not going to work. Because I got this from actually a reformed gang member. He stated that all gun control does is it takes the guns out of the hands of the law-abiding citizens. This isn't from some person that actually is some lawyer that's a Republican lawyer in Congress. This isn't from some right-wing extremist group. This isn't from the NRA. This is from a reformed gang member. And this is what I was told. This would mean that they're talking from experience. They're stating that all it does is disarm the actual legitimate people who have the right to own firearms and who are doing it for defense or hunting or however they want to use them. That it has no impact on the actual gang members themselves. The gang members are getting the guns no matter what. They're stealing it during these shipments of guns. He's even mentioned cases to where there were train shipments of guns that were being stolen and they weren't even being caught, and that's how these things were happening. There were different shipments like that were happening, and that's how these gang members were getting guns, and they'd get passed around. So the fact is when we see this happening, is we see these points is it's not going to stop gang members from getting guns. It's not going to stop the kids from getting guns. Kids are stealing them, and they're getting them illegally, or in the case that these people are obtaining them legally, it's not going to stop the shooting. The shooting is going to happen, and what you want to do is minimize damage by creating some type of equalization. The only way you can create an equalization is as Rand Paul has stated, the only thing that can stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. It's a smart statement because it's true. I hate to tell people this, but it's true. Gun control, all it does is take guns away from law-abiding citizens or restrict guns from law-abiding citizens. So many times we hear about this case where a woman was raped because she was trying to get a gun permit because she was in fear of her life with it, because she had paranoia that someone was stalking her. And then all of a sudden with it, what happens? We find out that her paranoia was right, and then she ends up dead in a ditch, being raped because she basically did not have a gun to actually defend herself. And the excuse from the left is, oh, but it kept it out of the hands of the criminals. No, it didn't. He basically had a gun. He was able to force it on her, and she basically ended up being killed and raped because of this. And they go, oh, but if you have a whistle, what's a whistle going to do? A whistle is not going to scare off a rapist. And they go, oh, wet yourself. If they're going to rape you, they're not concerned about that. If they're going that far, they don't care about a whistle because you're probably screaming. They don't care if you urinate yourself because they really don't care at that point. And at that point, they really don't care because they're really a sick individual, and there's nothing you could really do. The only thing you could do is basically have a gun and make them wet themselves. Have something that's basically going to defend yourself and make them retreat. That's the only way you can do it, because they're going to have some type of weapon that's going to make you do what they want to do. What you need to do is have a weapon to make them retreat. And that's the only way it's going to happen. And until these areas start realizing that all they're doing is they're making it impossible for people to actually defend themselves, and not only that, they're violating the Second Amendment. This is basically all they're doing. They're not actually doing this. You're finding these idiots who are basically saying, oh, but Trump's golfing, he's not doing anything about gun crime. Well, the fact is the only thing he could do is essentially put forth so that the people in Congress repeal the 1938 Firearms Act, which restricts certain types of firearms with it, and tell them to eliminate the Department of the ATF. And I think if they want something to be done, that's the best way to do it. And they're going to see very, very quickly that things are actually going to happen. But that's not what the Democrats are talking about. They're talking about restricting people's access to firearms even more than they are currently. There should be basically, very simply, no restrictions on firearms whatsoever. This isn't an extremist position. It's a position of the actual Constitution, which we all should believe in, and all the people in the legislative bodies and all the people in government should believe in, as they actually took an oath to uphold, not an oath to destroy. But we see that basically less than 10% actually try to uphold themselves. They actually try to basically, the other 90% take an oath to destroy, if not higher than 90%. if we look in now, if we go to some of the stuff on the I'll go on some of the stuff on YouTube for news, and basically we're finding a lot of for the most part I'm finding a lot of fluff, but if we'll go at the top, we'll see what they have for news. If there's any type of legitimacy, first thing I'll go over is the 25th Amendment. Basically, what that was done is it was more part of the coup against Trump, and the fact is currently Rosenstein was trying to state that that was only a joke. We have the case of Andy McCabe, who's actually come out and stated that no, it wasn't a joke. It was actually a legitimate plan, that it was meant to be. Rosenstein is saying it was a joke, but yet he has yet to actually come out in Congress and actually come out and actually have an actual hearing on that point, which states that we should actually look at Rosenstein's statements as being as false as can be, seeing that he's most likely going to be bumped and he's probably going to retire without actually making statements to Congress. I would state probably that he's trying to ride his time out and basically leave before he has to even make a statement to Congress. So really what we were seeing is basically that's why we saw that with the whole point of him making these statements to Congress. On the Jussie Smollett case with it, that's a little bit different. That's coming out basically in the news that CBS Evening News is trying to make it look like two Nigerian brothers are guilty of assaulting the Empire actor, but when it comes down to it, there's being questioned, and one of which is actually one of the actors from the actual show as well. So when it comes down to it, it's looking like he fabricated the case from the beginning for attention. Now, where does this come from? This comes from the fact that he was bumped from the show, and this came around right around the time when he just left the show, and he was looking for attention. Now, this is basically meant to be his kind of viral moment. They can sometimes get you on another show, or get you a movie, or get you a documentary. They can sometimes restart your career when your career looks like it's going into a downslide. And that's really what this is starting to look like. It's not looking like something that's actually legitimate. It's looking like a complete and utter hoax, and something that he basically saw his career going into a severe downslide, and he didn't want that to actually happen, so he wanted to get ahead of the curve and to basically create a complete and utter fabricated story to essentially blame two people who were innocent bystanders, basically blame two people one person from the show and most likely a friend of theirs or brother, and blame them and basically essentially cause them to lead to basically saying, hey, they're on the show but I'm not, so I'm going to create this whole big drama basically, and bring the thing of saying I'm black and I'm gay with it, so it's the reason why. And then he's probably going to lead to this whole big thing of saying I was bumped from the show because I'm gay, and he's going to keep on moving with this whole thing. And if you look at, he's been able to get a lot of press. Now the whole big deal with the press, being able to get the press, is the whole thing of linking it together. He's been able to get these interviews that normally he wouldn't, being kind of a small-time actor and really kind of being bumped from this position. And that's where this whole thing comes from, is was not exactly well known before this point, and this is only to raise his stock when he was especially expected to go downhill and become a nobody, most likely a pizza delivery guy down the street, or basically bagging groceries from this point on, because he was going to be a nobody at this point, and that's where we come from. Now, when we look at other things, is they're saying that Amazon should have. Next thing is like with Amazon, they say CNN Business is saying Amazon should have seen this coming. This is from. This is another thing trending on the news feed from CNN Business. Not necessarily. I don't see this with it. I think this is more the reaction of saying basically is if New York was not willing to take them, they basically gave the middle finger back to New York. And that's pretty much what it was. Is if they don't want to basically accept the new jobs coming in, then we're not going to go there. And because they do develop jobs within the region, and it usually does spur a lot of development. It's been a proven fact. If you look at this instance of there's a city near me, Kenosha. Kenosha has a fulfillment center there, and they've seen a great deal. They've seen a good number of jobs from it, and Kenosha's been able to actually build up quite nicely since that point of the Amazon fulfillment center coming in. And it's really and they've been able to start establishing sister cities with other cities around the world, and this is what's happened since that point. So what we're seeing is that doing this and blocking another headquarters from that is not exactly a smart business decision. It's looking like more of a petty thing with it between the socialists in New York and Jeff Bezos, who's basically tends to kind of jump around the map when it comes to politics. And I think that's the whole point. Yes, Bezos does take advantage of crony deals with it, but guess what? So do many other big business leaders. And let's go down the list. Here's from MSNBC. Did Donald Trump help launch Beto's 2020 campaign against him? I don't really think so, because I think when Beto O'Rourke lost to Ted Cruz, I think that put a lot of damage on his star power, and I think he kind of flushed it down the drain, because the fact is he was really originally more of a moderate civil libertarian before that point, and all of a sudden he started to change his tune and become more of this idea of a person that was more into pandering to this extreme left, and it just doesn't really fit. You can even see with the way he speaks, it's just so pandering, and he's trying to pander to the Mexican American voters, and it's just not working out well. Even the crowds are much smaller. Even during the campaign, they were not as they started to shrink. So I think his star has gotten a lot smaller because of just the mistakes, and you had the DUI was played up a lot more than it would normally have been had he have been playing his normal civil libertarian role and being a lot more concerned about actual points like that. And if he would have actually stuck to that point, he could have actually made a lot more damage for Ted Cruz. Except what he did is he went to this extremist left, and people said, I don't know about him. He doesn't seem to be the guy I'm interested in, because he essentially started to abandon all these ideas. And that started to anger a lot of people, and that's why he started in the lead, because people saw him as a civil libertarian, and then he started to abandon all of these ideas and that's where you saw these numbers started to crash out hardcore. So that's why he started to crash, and you're going to see his numbers start to fade big time. And it's not just going to be in Texas. You're going to see him fade elsewhere, because if he really can't win some of those people out there, he's not really going to win out in these liberal areas either, because they're going to see him too much as this like Hillary Clinton type of pandering type, and that's not going to really work out well for him. When we look over in some of the other news with like the let's look at the 21 Savage case. Yeah, he fears deportation after the ICE arrest. Basically, the fact is we need to look at that case legitimately. This is from ABC News, and the fact is with him is this is just basically based on stupidity. He was here since 2006 illegally. Previous to that point, with it, he had a legal visa, and that means you're talking that he had he was here during the Bush administration, the Obama administration, and the Trump administration during these times with it, and didn't think once to either A, renew his visa, or B, actually try to talk between the local consulate, which would most likely be in Atlanta. I figure there'd be a close one in Atlanta, most likely, and then the British embassy. Now, this is where it just doesn't even make sense with it, why he would not even make a talk of trying to get things done. And he's not even making any sense when it comes down to, oh, he's fearing deportation. He can get something done. He could have gotten something done. And the fact is he could have easily worked something out, but I think the reason why they're deporting him, it's like, come on, it's like you had plenty of time. We're talking he had over 2 years with the Trump administration. And when we're talking that is, if you've had over 2 years to do something and you don't do it, well, you kind of get what you deserve, because you kind of know, hey, my time's up with it. You know when your visa's up, because just like if you have a driver's license, a state ID, anything, a passport, you know when the time's up. You're looking at the actual dates, because you don't want to essentially enter into unlawful territory and have any problems arise. And that's why we come to that point. And that's why that's why we do this. And that's why people do it, and they keep up with that. And when we look at that, is we need to understand that people need to look and understand that that's all he had to do, is at least keep track of that. But he never did. And when people go, oh, I feel bad for him, well, he's a multi-million-dollar rapper. I mean, could you really feel bad for him? Most likely what's going to happen, at worst, if he gets deported, he flies back in $1 million plane, in a first class seat. They're not going to fly him back how they normally do with a lot of these people that are jumping over the southern border. He's not going to fly back like that, because it's basically a visa overstay. What's going to happen is he's basically going to be made to fly back normally with it. If he has the money to fly back on his own, they will basically make him do that, just like any other visa overstay. Visa overstays are usually considered a lot different than people who are actually coming here completely illegally without any type of lawful entry. It's completely different than any other type of situation. And that's what needs to be understood. Is so if he's they're just basically going to say, hey, take that. Hey, you can afford. You're going to fly back on your own voluntarily. Okay, fly back on your own voluntarily, and they're probably going to just say reapply, and we'll make it reapply, and then it's going to be all fine, and then end of story. Just don't do that. Just don't do anything stupid again, moron. If we keep looking down, we're basically going to find a lot of sports, stupid stunts, talk shows, and not much more with it, because it looks like we're talking right now a pretty slow news day, despite being the usual Friday dump. The last point that I'd probably make is about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. There's a couple of points on her. First is on Twitter, she basically had a bad outcome with when she was trying to do the idea of a tour to support the Green New Deal. That this is not much. This is just a very, very small piece, and it's basically where she tried to do that, and people on all sides of the aisle were basically stating little jabs about it. It's like, are you going to fly and do this, which is basically essentially the opposite of supporting the Green New Deal. Are you going to take an electric car, which is obviously what she's not going to do. And so they're basically poking fun at the whole thing. And the next part is on the other thing, which is basically on what's also been brung up with it, which is what they call the modern monetary theory, which is one of the things I brung up, I believe, on an earlier Periscope. And it basically goes over the point that a government can print its own money, and it's not responsible for anything. And essentially, it can eliminate all tax liability for everyone. It's just magic. It's like a magic wand. And this has even been talked about by Kyle Kulinski from the Young Turks Network. He's Secular Talk. This brainiac, should I say. Now, he tries to come up with some smart things with it. He'll state certain things that are positive, like non-intervention stuff on military, but then he'll come up, when it comes to economics, boy, does he give you a doozy. He says about the modern monetary theory. He loves this stuff. He is special, let's just say. Basically, it says that a government's the one that actually controls the money. If there's no actual real value of money, there's no actual commodity that actually controls money. It just comes out of thin air. And the government can keep printing and printing and printing, spending as much as it wants, because the government controls it all. And it doesn't matter that other countries hold our debt, because we can just hand them this useless, basically toilet paper of money that we're printing on a printer. It's basically like us handing them nothing but computer paper. It's actually less valuable. It's actually eventually going to be less valuable than computer paper. We might as well just hand them computer paper right now and just say, this is going to be our money now on. Because the fact is it totally negates any idea of how money is actually the medium, and currency is not actual money. It's just basically meant to represent money. It's merely a medium for money, and money is basically a medium for commodity exchange. And this is what people don't what these people don't understand, and why modern monetary theory is complete and utter bogus garbage. And you can come up with whatever type of options you want to try to validate what you want. That's why the Keynesian theory is garbage. The only theory that actually works is the Austrian theory. It basically says people are going to make their own damn decisions, and you can't anticipate that with any numbers. And the only thing that actually matters is the actual output that comes from that, and that will actually determine what the actual things such as gold, which is actually gold or silver, whatever you're using as the actual money. Now you can actually replace that with an actual paper medium so it becomes a little bit easier to handle for the money, but it's going to have be set at a certain value of gold to have any type of value. That's such as a gold standard. You can do either one, and that's what needs to be understood. You cannot do a fiat currency. Fiat currencies are garbage, and that's what the modern monetary system is based on. It's based on taking the idea of a Keynesian fiat currency and basically putting it on steroids, and basically saying that you don't even have this idea of interacting with other nations. It doesn't even consider that into the equation. And that doesn't even make any sense, because when we're talking about it, there's a reason why apples in Venezuela, apples in the Philippines, apples in Sweden, apples in Germany, apples in the US, and apples in Canada are not all equated at the same price. And that's because we have this thing called inflation. The moment you put in the modern monetary system it doesn't even account for any inflation. It doesn't even know what inflation is, because it just views as you can continually print more money, and it doesn't even think that's even a problem. And when you do that, you end up getting Venezuela, which is having massive inflation problems. And you can't just do that, because there's a reason why tax is collected with it. Because if the modern monetary theory was actually true and was actually applicable, people would not even need to pay taxation. Why would they ever even talk about taxing the rich if that was not even necessary for all this horrible government spending that they're talking about? Why would they need to even have it to begin with? Why would they have even started it? Why would why would people like Woodrow Wilson have even suggested such a horrible idea if it would have cost him part of the vote? Because that would have been a dumb idea. Nobody would have even considered it. Why would FDR have talked about raising the taxation for a huge number of people? He would never have suggested such a thing, because it would cost him so many votes, and that's a dumb idea, and nobody would have ever done that. That's why people don't talk about those things, because because when they start discussing those things, they'll realize that the modern monetary theory doesn't work, because if there's no reason for any influx of revenue and you can just print your way out of it, then there's no point for taxation. And if there's no point for taxation, then it proves that basically you have to have some type of influx of value somehow. And if that influx of value is coming from somewhere, it needs to be coming from inflation, because that's the only other way to gather money from. And that's the point of the whole system, is it's going to work on inflation. And when countries realize that, and they have and they're not going to buy up debt, that's essentially what ends up happening. And that's why when people say debt is the greatest national security threat, that's the reason why, is because nobody wants to buy up any of this stuff. So when they do buy up that stuff, they're going to be buying it up for buying and selling it and buying up land with that, to say we'll take this, but we want land with it, or basically rights to certain decisions. And that's what ends up happening, and that's what needs to be understood. That's the whole point. Now, if you like this discussion on this with it, I'll try to do as many of these, either Periscope or YouTube based ones, but I'm going to cut it right here and see what we have going. This is about just a little bit short of 50 minutes, so I think that's pretty good. And I'll see you guys tomorrow. I think I'm uploading a video within a couple of minutes, so I'll see you guys later, and that should be it. Bye, guys.